Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of our Justice and Pieces guest speaker series. Continuing our little series here about 1 year reflections from our paralegal ventures. And today we have Deborah joining us. So, first of all, thank you so much, Deborah, for taking the time to speak with me and speak with students and anyone else listening. So, maybe you could tell us a little bit about yourself and your role at the Law Society.
Sure. Thank you, JP, for having me here again. It's always a pleasure to be able to talk to you and share a little bit about what I've been doing. So, my name is Deborah Moriah, and I have been a paralegal for about 8 years. I was elected as a bencher last year, so exactly a year ago, May 1st. Actually, no, it would be April 28th, I believe, and we started at the end of May. So I've been a bencher for about a year now. I am also still practicing as a paralegal. I'm an in-house paralegal at a charity called Parents of Black Children. It's an advocacy group. And I work in-house providing legal services to parents and their children in school boards across Ontario. And I have been employed there since the beginning of this year. So that work keeps me very busy. I also sit on the board of directors for Legal Aid, and I am the founder or one of the founders, co-founder of the Ontario Association of Black Paralegals. And I'm also on the board there as an advisor. So that is a little bit about me and the work that I do. It keeps me very busy, but I'm excited to talk to you today about what my venture life looks like.
Yeah, so let's get into that because I mean, certainly we've talked, in the past about some of those other things, and I think again, a year later, almost exactly a year later, we've getting a chance here to say, well, how did that 1 year go, and maybe just sort of throw that to you, right? I mean, it's been a year. What was it like, once you got the results, right? I think we talked. I think the day the results came out, if I'm not mistaken, all five of you. And you had like the celebrations to go to literally minutes later. So from that point, what has happened, what was like the orientation like, and perhaps again what you can share in terms of you specifically committees and things you've been on.
Right. So the first 6 months, I would say, were spent really just learning. Even though I'm on a board before this, like I said, I'm on legal aid and with the Ontario Association of Black Paralegals. Every board is different. So you learn how each board works as far as governance is concerned. So I should start by saying, as one of the things I probably should have said in the beginning, is that what I'm sharing is really just, these are my views and my opinions. It's not about the Law Society. It's not about any of the other ventures. But the first year, like I said, it's been a lot. It's been a lot, is what I can say. There's a lot of materials that we're reading all of the time. A lot is coming at you. And I really spent the first few months just learning and taking in what was happening around me and asking questions. And I found that people are pretty receptive to the questions that have been asked. Staff is very helpful. Benchers that have been there for some time have been very helpful. And even the newer benchers, the ones that are just elected at the same time as me, they're helpful as well. And so we spent a lot of time just learning how the inner workings of the Law Society and what our roles are. And I think it's really important when you do start a new role, even if it's something that you've done before, that you do take time to sit back and listen and just kind of absorb the environment so that you're able to participate in a meaningful way. And so that's really what the first 6 months looked like. I didn't really feel like there was a lot happening. And I think the reason behind that is that we were an entirely new bench. So, as you know, the Good Governance Coalition was elected kind of in a sweep. And so everything was new for everyone. And so there was it was a little bit of a learning curve. And I think it was a little bit difficult to, like, on the side of staff because they were working with all new people. And so we just had to learn what was expected of us and what we expected of them. And I think it was a pretty smooth process. I enjoyed it. And right now, I really feel like the work is getting started. And so I guess I can jump on to the next question because I think it was a little bit of a two-parter. So as far as committees are concerned, I am on 6 committees. So I'm the one paralegal of all of the 5 paralegal benchers that is not an adjudicator. So I don't sit on the Law Society Tribunal. And I'm on 6 committees because of that. I have the time to do that. So I am on the Human Rights Monitoring Group, the Access to Justice Committee, the Paralegal Standing Committee, the Proceedings and Authorization Committee, the Equity and Indigenous Affairs Committee, and the Tribunal Reform Working Group. So that takes up a lot of my time, but what I really like about it is that I get to learn all of the different aspects of what happens at the Law Society and why things happen. I get to contribute to different areas that, that I was able to be on the receiving end of, but I get to see just the inside workings of how things go, and I'm able to provide my perspective, ask questions. And what I really like about these committees is that everyone is receptive. So most of the committees that I'm on, except for access to justice and paralegal standing, I'm the only paralegal. And even though I'm the only paralegal, I don't feel like I'm different that's on the board or on that committee. I feel that I'm an equal with all my other colleagues. I'm able to give my suggestions and my opinions about things. I'm able to ask questions. I am asked questions. So it's a very collaborative process, and I really do enjoy it.
Now, are you able to elaborate on some of those committees, kind of what their areas are in terms of, what do they do, and the kinds of stuff that they're responsible for bringing back to convocation ever so often?
Yeah. So all committees within the Law Society, so within convocation and on the board, um, we actually plan. So what we do, a lot of the committees, what we actually have to do is make plans within a committee, make decisions within the committee, and then bring those as proposals to the entire board for the board to either approve or deny or ask questions. So that's basically how committees work. Because we are such a large board, there's 53 of us, we can't do that work at the board level. So it's done at the committee level. So I can just give you an idea of what each of the committees that I am on does. I'll start with paralegal standing. I think that's pretty obvious. Everything that we do has to do with paralegals, and how paralegals provide services, how we can support paralegals providing services, and make the profession one that is easy to access, one that is able to provide mentorship. The Law Society is able to provide mentorship for those within the profession. We work in collaboration with some of the other committees. So whenever there's something that comes up with any of the other committees that has to do with paralegals, they get in touch with the paralegal standing committee chair, and that comes to the meeting and we discuss things there. The other committee that I'm on is the Access to Justice Committee, and that just deals with how justice is served in Ontario through the Law Society. And we just, whatever initiative has to do with access to justice comes to that committee, and we come up with ideas there. We frequently have guest speakers come and speak to us about things that are happening in other provinces, which is really interesting. So access to justice is probably, probably shouldn't say this, it is my favorite committee, outside of the paralegal standing committee. I know that that should be my favorite, but access to justice is near and dear to my heart. So I'm very happy to have been appointed to that committee. On proceedings and authorization committee, also known as PAC, is a committee that deals with complaints that have been made by the public. Equity Indigenous Affairs deals with equity and EDI concerns within the profession, and how it impacts not just the public, but also how it impacts licensees. And then the Tribunal Reform Working Group, that's a newer committee that I was recently appointed to. And the title says it all. We're working on how to make the tribunal work to the best of its ability. And then there's the Human Rights Monitoring Group. And that is actually a committee that a lot of people don't fully understand why it exists and whether or not it's really in the LSO's mandate. I think part of the reason that I wanted to be on that committee is because I didn't fully understand it. And basically, what we do is we review issues happening across the globe that impact lawyers, paralegals, and advocates who are being either held, in prison or for whatever reason for the work that they're doing as advocates. And the Law Society writes intervention letters, just like many of the other organizations do across the world, in support of those individuals. And we basically review things that come to us and then either accept them or ask questions or table them or whatever. And then we bring that to convocation. So that is basically, in a nutshell, what I do over each 30 to 31 days of each month. So yeah, it's very, very interesting.
So it's been a year, right? And you've shared kind of the different aspects of what you're doing as a bencher there with the respective committees, the six of them, plus convocation itself and other responsibilities. Anything that, if you can go back a year ago, right, and think, well, hey, I'm getting elected. Um, what am I jumping into? What sort of is different from now a year of experience under your belt, right? Because besides Michelle, right, the other four of you are coming in fresh, right? What did you think? what your expectations were in this role, and what's maybe gone according to those expectations, what's been a little different, and what is going to propel you going forward with that knowledge for year two as that kicks off, May 1st or May 20th or whatever the 1 year anniversary officially is in the role.
Yeah, it's funny because I think I may have shared this with you in the past, is that when I decided to run for Venture, it wasn't a decision that came easily, and it wasn't at one I made like right away. It took me some time to decide whether or not it was something that I thought I should do at this point in my career, whether or not I thought I could be impactful in any way. It took me 2 years to decide to actually run. And when I finally made the decision to run, I would be lying if I didn't say I regretted it, because the election was really difficult. It was a lot of work. It was hard to keep up with all of that. But I'm glad I did it. I think going into it, I was expecting it to be a lot scarier than it actually is. I don't think that I expect it to be as welcomed as I feel. I didn't know that. I thought that as a paralegal, from the rumors that I'd heard about things that had happened at Convocation over the years, that it was going to be a very difficult place to be. But that has not been the case at all. Like I said earlier, it has been a very collaborative experience. The lawyers that we work with are very open to our opinions. They ask questions, they answer questions. We often meet to come up with plans together. It's a very collaborative experience. It's not at all what I imagined that it would be. And that's a great thing. And as I said earlier as well, every board is different. I would just say that the LSO is just a bigger version of what I've been doing already. And so while I was prepared for that, it still did take some time to absorb it all and to be able to just kind of, I guess, be a part of the machine. But yeah, I love it. I am glad that I'm a part of it. And most of what I want to do right now is make an impact for paralegals as far as mentorship is concerned. So as part of my platform, that was one of the things that I talked about a lot, is that paralegals often when they first start out, they don't fully understand what they're doing. Everything that you learn in theory isn't always as easy in practice. And I remember starting out as a paralegal and just being like, I was like a fish out of water. I had no idea what was happening around me. And I was starting my business, and that was back in 2018. And I didn't have a mentor. And I didn't feel like there was enough information coming out of the Law Society to support me. And I have seen that changed over the past few years. And I can see that that's going to continue to change based on some of the things that we've been discussing.
So before I follow up on that, I did want to know, I mean, kind of the counterpoint, right, is if everything's going smoothly. One of the things that was brought up, I mean, regardless of whichever group got elected, if they got elected, almost entirely, is there a discussion or is there a debate or disagreement when, of the 53 benchers, I think 45 of them, right, or maybe a little less. I think some of them became justices or the treasurer or whatnot. Um, how is that like? I mean, does it is sort of discussion kind of stifled because everyone's like, "Oh, I agree," or are you finding that's not the case, even though you ran kind of collectively with almost 90% of the benchers?
Yeah, that's a great question, because that's not the case at all. We definitely don't agree on everything, but I think that's why I like it so much, because there's always debate. There's always something that we don't always agree on everything. There's always questions that come up in convocation. Obviously, if you watch convocation, I don't know how many people actually do. We have a very specific process. And so usually when you have questions about something, that's not really the time to bring it up. We bring it up beforehand so that it can be dealt with efficiently. Otherwise, we'd be there all day. But yeah, I don't know if anyone watched the first convocation that we had in September. There was an incident where there was a motion that was brought that ended up being tabled because I think it was almost a 50-50 split, where some of us just didn't think that there was enough information to make that decision, and we needed more information. And so when the motion was brought to table, the motion was brought to table, the original motion, I don't think people expected that, but it was nice to see. And I actually enjoy convocation more when there are debates. I think it's more interesting. I like hearing other people's perspectives, even if they're different from mine. And I've often found that at times when I'm in those meetings, I might have an idea of how I'm going to vote on something based on the materials that I've read. But then when I come to convocation and I hear someone else's perspective, it might change my mind. And I would like, I'm telling you the truth, like my mind could change within the first five people that speak. The first person might say something and I'm like, oh no, maybe I'll vote this way. And then someone else will start speaking and I'm like, oh, but that's a good point. I might vote this way. So it's a really great way to inform yourself, to have more information in order to make a decision that is impartial. I don't think there's anyone that votes other than how they truly feel it should go. We don't, it's not like we're having secret meetings beforehand that we're all going to vote like this. That is not how it happens. It very much is on the spot. Once the information is given to us, we are able to make that vote. Sometimes, we are just asked, is anyone against it, or is anyone abstain or something like that? And sometimes there's a roll call vote. So we know how people feel about certain situations. But I do find that when we do have debate at convocation, it's respectful debate. You don't have people yelling at each other. Um, and then that's not to say that some of the things that people say aren't offensive, because if you watch, you'll see that some of the things that people say can be offensive. But that's okay. I mean, I just feel like we're all different people. With 53 people, if we were all thinking the same, I just don't think that we would be serving the public the way that we're supposed to be.
And you brought up mentorship as a piece there that you felt passionately about when you were running, and touched on a little bit there. So, is there anything, I mean, specifically that you can share about that piece, or even if it's a plan that you want to sort of see develop further? Yeah, let's leave it with that. I have a follow up to that about things more generally, but what about the mentorship piece that's happening?
There's two things that for me personally, I would like to see over the next, well, 3 years that are following this one, is I would really like to see more mentorship for paralegals when they're starting out their practices so that they have that direct knowledge. So they're able to either, whether it's watching something or calling the Law Society or attending CPDs or whatever it is, having more knowledge when it comes to how to start your practice, what to do in specific areas of starting your practice, because that I think a lot of paralegals aren't practicing because they don't know where to start. I don't know exactly what the statistic is right now, but I know that there's a huge percentage of paralegals who are licensed, but they're not practicing as paralegals. They're practicing, they may be working at a law firm as a law clerk or as a legal assistant somewhere, but they're not practicing as a paralegal because they don't have the knowledge. So I would really like to see the Law Society support paralegals more in that way. One of the other things I would like to see is more experiential learning. I talked about this a lot on my platform. As much as we're able to learn in school, as much as we're able to, or not as much as we're able to learn on our placements, I just feel like there's a gap there. For me, I was lucky enough in my placement to be able to work with someone who had me in court on the very first day. And as terrifying as that was, it was a great learning experience. Meanwhile, some of my counterparts, some of the classmates that I had at Centennial, when they were doing their placements, they were filing and they weren't learning anything. And it was really frustrating for them because they wanted to be out there actually learning what they had to do as paralegals once they started. So I really feel like my main thing is what I'm trying to push for, and I hope that I can do it over the next 3 years, is to have more opportunities for paralegals to have hands-on learning and to really be able to get that knowledge on the job, or even in some type of program that comes between graduating from school and becoming licensed. And I do know that there are some forthcoming initiatives to help paralegals, and those are the ones who are just starting out, and even those who have been in private practice for a while. There are some initiatives. I can't exactly announce what they are right now, but they will be announced soon. And one of the things that I do know is that there is something that's coming along to help them with private practice, but also with just the day-to-day things that you would do as a paralegal, and it helps fill in those gaps. So I'm looking forward to that being announced. I'm looking forward to the initiative starting, and I'd like to see how it makes a difference in how many paralegals will actually begin to practice as sole practitioners, and also with retention. I hope that it will keep more paralegals in the profession.
Yeah, I remember I had the number because it used to be a question on my practice management course. I think it was
Well,
like 38.5% or something along those lines of licensed paralegals providing like in the active, um, in private practice. And I, because I
mhm.
remember having this discussion, and perhaps now from your perspective, you can offer some insight to my students, because no, I asked him, what do you think the number is, right? And you get like 60, 70, 80, right? I mean, again, I don't have the lawyer number off the top of my head either. But they were pretty surprised. I would say, well, think about it, right? Because there's, 25 of you, let's say, in my class, and maybe 20 of you will finish the program, first of all, right? And then of that 20, maybe 15 of you will write the licensing exam. I know the results just came out yesterday, so I know that number, approximately, 12 or 11 of that 15 will pass. And then of that,
Mhm.
let's say 10 for mathematical ease here, of that 10, four of you will be practicing, right? And so
Yeah,
we've gone from a class of 25 to four, and then 5 years later it may be two, right? And so
exactly.
that's
Yeah.
concerning, right? I mean, I think to students looking to enter into a profession that no, especially a lot of them that it's a second, they've already finished a degree, and they're going for this for, an accelerated program, that if you're telling me about four out of 25 in this room are going to be working as paralegals in the field, in 2 years from now, and perhaps two of them, there's got to be some kind of plan of, well, where are they going? Because there's a difference between, are they working as law clerks, and maybe because they don't need to use that license in the firm, or are they, just doing some kind of other office job that they were doing before they even went to school, right? And I don't know if
Yeah.
there's anything added to that mentorship piece you're looking at. Have they, is there data that the law study has, or is looking at in terms of what can be done? I mean, I know there's stuff that probably by the time people watch this, they're like, oh, you should have told, this is out there, right? But what can you share about, other things, maybe even down the road, about fixing that number?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I will say this, just because it's on my mind, I do want to mention that there is a survey. I feel like it might have expired by now, but there is a survey that was being done. It was serving licensed paralegals in the province to find out, and I guess the whole point was us to try and find out what is happening and why it's happening, where paralegals are seeing gaps and why they're leaving the profession, why they stay, and things like that. So hopefully that will bring some more data that the Law Society can take and provide more information surrounding that. But one of the other areas, as far as mentorship is concerned, is that we actually have a much larger scope of practice than I think a lot of paralegals know. And so we do want to be able to show them and encourage them in other areas. As much as we all want scope to be expanded, and I will say it's not just paralegals that want expanded scope, there's lawyers that want that as well, like at least bencher lawyers that I work with that are interested in seeing paralegals do more, because it is an access to justice issue. And so we're looking at seeing how we can encourage that change. But as much as that is something that's on the table, we know that change takes time, even if that's something that happens in the next couple of months. And I'm not saying it will, I'm just hypothetically speaking, even if that was a motion that was brought and passed, it takes time for it to be implemented. So in the meantime, we want to be able to take a look at the things that paralegals can do and encourage them in those areas and support them in those areas. Because one of the issues I find is that there are so many areas that paralegals can practice, but we don't teach them in school, which I think is a little bit weird. So, I mean, I remember my administrative law class. I remember my tribunals class. It was one semester. And that's not enough time, I think, to learn all that there is to learn. So I don't know how we can build on that, but I would love to be a part of building on that for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I just had tribunals where, again, there I would tell students that, oh, there's hundreds, or somebody once told me potentially thousands of different tribunals, in Canada, that, maybe within your ability to practice, and so, we will learn about the major ones, but right, I mean, one of the exercises is like, well, what's your background, right? Because, some people might have teaching experience. I'm like, well, there's a Ontario College of Teachers Discipline
Yeah,
tribunal, right? There's, physicians, veterinarians, nurses, and if you have those subject matter expertise, maybe if that was a career you had or you worked in, and now you have the legal side, you have a whole practice area right there for you, right?
yeah,
But again, I think there's a lot of areas that are underserved where, and again, maybe it might be looking at what are the reasons why people gravitate to provincial offenses or landlord tenant or small claims, and not these other ones. Like, is it about maybe there's needs to be, as you said, mentorship. Like, are there paralegals in those fields? And I know there's been quite a few recently where, even I've reached out to them, say, hey, can you do something? I know there's like a HRTO. Um, I don't know if it's the CCLA is organizing it. The Carleton. I'm gonna forget the other, but I believe there's something coming. I think it's Ms.
The
Murray.
Carleton County Law System. Yeah,
Yes,
I saw that. Yeah, yeah.
and so things
And that's
like
the thing.
that that
Like,
that help.
yeah.
Whoever goes to that will now say, well, hey, maybe I can run this by you. So again, it's excellent when you see, organizations and people bringing that to the open, right? That like the more that there are people in those niche sort of areas, the more that it then opens up those areas for students to say, well, maybe I'm going to do my internship with you at the doing human rights work, and after I've picked up that, and I know one of the things we probably can talk about, right, is the internship hours are going from 120 to 240, I believe, as of September 1st, for students in any program that enroll after September 1st, they'll be doing 240 hours. So that hopefully allows more exposure.
Mhm.
But as you said, if some places are like filing and fetching coffee and not doing as
Yeah,
much, then that you can't control that experience. Even if you're working at a firm that does human rights, if you don't actually go to the hearings or you don't actively participate in that, you're not going to get that exposure. And then you may not feel confident to do that
exactly.
after practice. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's why you had mentioned earlier, why is it that people are doing landlord tenant board or small claims or a POA? It's because it's accessible. It's easy to get experience there. But if only a few paralegals or a few lawyers are doing human rights, and it's true, there's just a select few that are even working in the tribunals. So there's only a few of us working in the tribunals. That's just not enough for mentorship. There's not enough expertise there to go around, so to speak. So I just would love to see some type of expansion in that way. And I couldn't even tell you what that would look like, but I would love to see an expansion in those areas. And I would love to see paralegals take advantage of that because there is a lot of work there. Like even the work that I do is not what most paralegals do. Like I do education law. And we didn't learn about that in school at all. But because I have the written advocacy skills, because I have a human rights background, because I have my own lived experience, I have children myself, and two of them are well, one of them is she's graduated now, but one of them is at TDSB high school. Um, I watched all of that. So I was able to advocate for my children in school, so I had that experience and I was able to bring all of that to the table to now do this type of work that is supporting hundreds of families across Ontario. So I think it's really important to take a look at what your skills are, not just what your skills are, but also what you love to do and what you're passionate about, what comes to you naturally, that you don't even really have to think about. Nobody has to convince you to do it. And those things that come to you naturally, those are areas that you can fit in to the work that you do as a paralegal. Because I've often heard people say when I first started that law is literally in everything. In everything that we do in our society, law has some type of connection to it. And so as a paralegal, you can get creative. It doesn't have to be the only things that you see that are the most popular. It can be the thing that you're really good at. And so I just encourage paralegals and students who are about to graduate, ones who have just been licensed, to really think about what that might look like, because you can create a practice that is something that no one else is really doing, and there's not a whole lot of competition. And honestly, I don't even think there really is competition when it comes to law because everybody needs a legal representative at some point in time in their lives. Like someone is going to need some type of support. And whether that's consumer protection, that's another area that a lot of people aren't aware that they can work in. Get to know the Consumer Protection Act. There's a lot of work there because a lot of people experience unfair business practices and they don't know what they can do. They don't know what their rights are. So read some of these acts and get to know what it is that these acts are saying are your rights and the rights of the public and the obligations of certain individuals. If you have that knowledge, when someone comes to you, you can help them and you can build a practice around them. I'm sure you're aware of or familiar with Michelle's story about how she built a practice around WSIB, and not a lot of paralegals do that either. And so there's so many different areas that we can grow and build on. It doesn't have to be the ones that you normally see. And that's not to say that if you want to work in that area, you shouldn't. I say go for it. There's lots of room for everyone. I just think that it would be prudent for you if you're new and you're starting out to just try and do something that is close to your heart, something that comes easily.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't know if there's anything, that's been happening that you can share, any topics. It kind of shows obvious because tomorrow you have convocation. So by the time like I post about
Yeah.
this, there will be stuff available. But anything you could share, kind of along those veins, or that paralegals would be interested in knowing that's happening at the Law Society, um, or maybe they're not aware of some of the supports there. I know. I think I saw a post about the coaching advisory network that again is a resource that's helpful. I think perhaps for paralegals
Yeah.
to know about, but anything you can think of that would be worthwhile to share for any of the newly licensed. And again, there's a bunch of people who just got the successful result, and they'll be newly licensed later on this, maybe not in May. Of course, tomorrow we're going to the welcome reception where there'll be a bunch of recently licensed paralegals from late last year, and then again looking for the next step. So what can you share with them here today?
Yeah, so I mean, like I said earlier, I can't share details on what's coming tomorrow, but I can say that there are a few things that have happened over the past year. If you've been watching Convocation or you've been looking at the newsletters that come out every month, there was a motion, the Federation of Law Society of Ontario Law Societies there was a motion that came out in May of last year, and there was a friendly amendment for paralegals to be included in that motion. And that motion was basically, it allows the Law Society to develop and implement strategies and initiatives and incentives that will encourage paralegals and lawyers to practice in underserved communities across Ontario, and mainly rural communities in Ontario. So that's really good. So we don't know exactly what that program is going to look like, but we're in the process of planning that program. And so, like I said, there will be certain incentives that will be put forth for people who are willing to move their practice to another area of the province. And originally, when that motion was put forth, it was just for lawyers, but we asked for paralegals to be included. Another one that came out just a few months ago was the Certified Specialist Program, which I'm sure you're very much aware of that. There was a consultation done. People did not want that program to go. The program was brought back. Originally, that program was only for lawyers, but we actually were able to get an amendment to include paralegals as well. As I said earlier, those changes take time, but we're looking forward to having a program for paralegals to be certified specialists in the areas that they work in. And I think that's a really great thing because it offers them an opportunity to say, I'm an expert in the work that I do. I've been doing this, especially paralegals who have been working for a very long time. And you know that there are a few paralegals that are known for things. And we know who they are, like within the profession, but I think it's important that the public is able to be aware that these people are experts in this area. So it's really great that program has been opened up for paralegals as well. Um, and other than that, as far as mentorship, like you mentioned, the Coach and Advisory Network, that is a great place to go if you are starting out and you do need support. I would definitely contact the Law Society and try and get into that program. And if you are a paralegal who's been practicing for a while, you can volunteer to be a part of that program as well. And I think that's also a great way to learn. I find that when I'm mentoring and when I'm teaching, I learn as well. So it's a great thing to do. And I would encourage you to do that as well. And I will say this, being a bencher is not something that I look at as, I guess I look at it as a privilege. So for me, as I said to you earlier, it wasn't something that I was sure I wanted to do. And I do feel like it is a privilege to do it, but I don't think that I'm any different than any other paralegal in Ontario. And so I would also encourage newly licensed and existing paralegals to look at the ways in which the work that they're doing now is impacting them, the ideas that come from that regarding changes that they might want to make to the profession, and just make note of that and talk to your colleagues and just continue to plan and come up with ideas, because at some point, the elections are going to open up again. And if you have really great ideas and you have support, you can also be in this position. And I think it's important for paralegals to know that this exists. And I think a lot of paralegals don't necessarily know about the elections and what benchers do. And I did find that during the election, when I would talk to people, they had no idea what a bencher does. And so I hope that, especially through things like this, interviews with you, and some of the other information that we put out there, that people will learn more about what this role is, and that we'll see more paralegals step up to do this role, because I think that we need a diversity. We don't need just the same people all of the time. I think we also just need people who have fresh ideas. And so I would just encourage anyone who thinks that this might be something that they're interested in to give it a try. And even in the meantime, as you prepare, volunteer to be on other boards so that you can get an idea of what governance looks like, what's expected of you, what your role would be, so that when you're in a position like this, you're ready to go.
And you just mentioned the word diversity there. And I know obviously, you've had different roles, but sort of being one of the co-founders of the Ontario Association of Black Paralegals. I mean, now being on the Law Society, I mean, I know there's certainly a number of initiatives there. Um, I know there was recently, I think the cable and OABP were involved as well on with the Law Society in putting things on there. So what other kinds of things addressing that, because I know that was another issue that you were passionate about a year ago when we talked in your background. Is there anything there that you can share again from being in this role for a year that you see what the Law Society is doing, and anything else you can share for people that that are interested in knowing what the Law Society does in response to the diversity of our bar or our licensed paralegals that we have.
Yeah, so the Law Society does have the committee. The committee that I'm on is the Equity and Indigenous Affairs, and we do deal with any issues relating to equity. One of the things I found at the Law Society is that it's a lens. So EDI is something that we see everything through the EDI lens. So it's not necessarily, at least I can speak for myself, I don't necessarily see it as, it's not necessarily a topic. And I think that that's is a little bit controversial, but I think a lot of times, especially over the past few years, we've seen EDI as something that we have to do. We have to do EDI. We have to have an EDI initiative. We have to have an EDI department. But I really think we just have to see everything through that lens. Everything that we do, every committee, every decision we make, we have to see it through the lens of more than just the dominant group. We have to say, how does this impact everyone who will come into contact with this? We need to consider every single person. And that's how I see it. I don't think it necessarily needs to be a special program. It just needs to be something that is across the board that we're always constantly thinking about in every decision that we make.
And I guess when you look at it with that lens, and there's no anything right that can be done, any decision, or even like the certified specialists, as you brought up, right? That, well, how does this impact under that lens differently, right? Because who are
Yeah,
the people that are certified, and who may be going, or how that helps them maybe in their practice, and it could affect different people differently because of again, that
exactly.
lens you point out there.
Yeah. And I think that's a really important point that you made. Everything impacts people in a different way. We can't say that if we make a decision as a regulator to do something, that everyone is it's gonna have the same impact on every single person. And we have to be aware of that when we're making those decisions. And I do find that, at least with me, in any committee that I'm in, if there's something that we're discussing, I'm always thinking of it that way. And so if I'm thinking about how will it might impact this person this way, but how will it impact this person? And those are the questions that I ask. And we need to think about it that way. So, and I think that people are really receptive to those questions and to having those perspectives. They don't necessarily say, oh, that doesn't matter. I do find that people are receptive to hearing other perspectives and other people's life experiences, and understanding how, the decisions that we make matter. It matters. It matters to every single person, and I'm not just talking about licensees, but the public as well.
Yeah, so with respect to again the loss idea and decision making, and the process, I think for people, and you may have been obviously one of them a year ago when you weren't a bencher, right? Well, how does everything work, and why isn't this idea implemented right now, or scope, right? You threw out a hypothetical, well, how about in a couple months maybe you might have a different scope. So is there anything you could kind of share about sort of the inner workings of the Law Society for those who may have that same thought, right? I mean, why can't we get this, or why is it taking so long for this type of program to go forward, or what more data is needed. Again, it's very easy from one side to say those things, and the the appearance, and again, same with politics for that matter, right? If you're you know not the ruling party, whether provincially or federally, right, that it's easy to say, well, this needs to be done and needs to be done right now. Anything you can kind of share in response to sort of maybe newly licensed or oldly licensed paralegals or lawyers about the process and decisions being made by the Law Society and then the rationale for it?
Yeah, sure. And I think one of the main things that people need to understand when it comes to any board, not just the Law Society, any board, and even like you said with the government, is that a lot of what is passed as far as motions are concerned, these are plans. And so it's not like there's like a skeleton. So this is what we want to do. We've done our research. This is why we think it will work. Can we do this? If the board agrees, yes, we can do this, we then have to go into planning mode with staff to make it happen. And so we're not looking at a fully formed plan when it comes to convocation. I mean, it's planned to a certain extent to give us the information that we need to understand whether or not it will work. We've done the research we need to do to ensure that what the steps we're taking make sense. But then we have to put it into practice. We have to implement this thing. And it doesn't happen, none of that ever happens overnight. So even if you think to yourself, it's kind of like a business plan, for instance. So, and I don't know if every, I guess not, I don't know if that's a great example because not everybody does business plans. But if you were recently in school as a paralegal student, I'm sure that you took that business plan course where you painstakingly had to outline everything that you would do to make your business work. And that was the plan. But now you have to make your business. And so even though you have this business plan, and you put it into place, you open up your doors, you don't automatically make the $500,000 you said you were going to make as part of your business plan. It takes time to make that happen. It takes planning, it takes hiring people or getting a loan. It takes certain things to put that stuff in place. And in any board, at the committee level, we're planning and we're doing the research and we're making sure that we have all of the questions to answer when we come to the board. The board asks questions. Sometimes we don't have the questions that the board is, we don't have the answers to the questions that the board is asking. So we have to go back and do more research. And then you bring it again. And then once all of those questions are answered, then we vote. And if the board decides, yes, this is going ahead, we then have to go work with an entirely new group of people, which is the staff, to make it happen. And so these things do take time. And we need to understand the way things work. And I would really just encourage people who are worried about the timeline to really just do a little bit of research and understand how things work. Go to convocation, pay attention to that stuff. Because I remember until I decided to become a bencher, I had never watched convocation. And so I had no idea what was happening at the Law Society. But if you watch it, you will understand a little bit more why things take time. And you might even have questions that come to mind yourself that you can then go and ask one of the bencher colleagues that you have and just say, hey, I was watching convocation and they brought this up and this is my concern. And so it really helps you be a part of the process in some ways. It helps you come up with ideas. It also helps you understand why things are the way they are.
Yeah, and I guess the other thing that came up, and I don't know if there's any more information with respect to family law, right? The FLSP and that I believe the plan is early next year that existing licensees can go into a course and get that designation. Is there anything more you can share? Or I know obviously it's waiting on the institution there at Fanshawe to kind of go through some of the details, but I mean, is there anything that, I know I just talked to Mike about this last week, and he said, no, some stuff is, still a ways away from, being ready to take in the students to sign up and register. But I don't know if there's like a information list or anything else that the law study can provide about FLSP.
Yeah, so right now everything is in Fanshawe's hands. So we're waiting for them to finish up with everything and they will be announcing soon. And they will be providing information about how people can sign up for this program. And in the meantime, people who are interested in signing up, I would suggest that they reach out to us at the Paralegal Standing Committee. We can put their name on a list, and once everything is available, they will be contacted. So their name will be added to the list. So basically, the subscribers list, so to speak. And once that information becomes readily available, like registration information and all of that, they will be sent an email.
Perfect. Is there anything else, Deborah, in your role or anything coming from the Law Society or any of the committees you're on, or again, a year later, that you've become attuned to the workings at the Law Society that we haven't touched on that you'd like to share with students and licensees that may be listening?
I would just say, I think I alluded to it a little bit earlier, but I really would like to see more people within the profession be involved. And I don't even know really what that looks like, but come to events, go to CPDs. If you have ideas for CPDs or things that you want to learn, reach out to someone at the Law Society. There is, so the LSO CPD, I don't know if you're familiar with that, if anyone who's watching is familiar with that, but they are always looking for ideas. If you want to present on a CPD, they're always open to having paralegals who have experience share their experience. It's actually a great way to learn too. Like I remember there were days, past where I had never been on a CPD before, and I was nervous about the idea of being put on the spot. But I think it's a really great way to expand your knowledge. You can get CPD credit for it, so why not do it? So I would definitely encourage people to do that. I would encourage people to be start volunteering on different associations. It also gives you an opportunity to learn. Um, Coach and Advisor Network, I'll say it again. If you have been practicing for a while and you want to share your expertise, join the Coach and Advisor Network as a mentor, as a coach or an advisor in mentorship. And then if you need help, you can figure out that there as well. You can join that the CAN network and get assistance there as well. You can also call the hotline. So the Law Society has a hotline. So if you are not sure about what to do, if you're in the middle of trying to figure something out as far as your work is concerned and you have questions, you can call the Law Society to get assistance. That's another thing you can do. And I don't think that people talk about this enough, but the Law Society does have something called MAP. And right now it's completely escaping me what that acronym is, but it does deal with mental health supports. And so if you do find yourself feeling overwhelmed, you can contact what is it called? I feel like you're about to tell me.
Member Assistance Program.
That's it. Yeah, it's the member assistance program. You can contact them and get the help that you need. And it's a really great program. And I don't think that people use it as much as they should. But it is really, really helpful. So I would encourage you to do that.
And
And
it's
then
free and it's confidential. And for any of the students, it's open to you as well. Why as
yeah,
soon as you've registered into a paralegal accredited paralegal program, I think a lot. And one of the things I don't know actually because I know it used to be Doran Gold would come by and
yeah.
talk more about the program, and I don't believe it's him anymore. But again, ways to know that that's available for you freely and confidentially, and you don't even have to be licensed yet, right? If you're in the process of either a law student or a paralegal student, those are available to you too.
And having said that about not having to be licensed, you can join associations as a student. And I would love to see more students join associations because it's a great way to start being a part of the profession before you're actually a part of the profession. And you get to meet people and it could also be an opportunity for you to get the placement, the perfect placement for you, or even just a mentor once you're licensed. So yeah, I would absolutely encourage students to do that.
Perfect. So, Deborah, last question then. Any final words of wisdom for anyone else? I know we just had some there, but any final words to add for any of the students listening or the newly licensed? And again, as I say this yesterday, I know a number of my students and others got the good news that they passed their licensing exam, and as well, there's also students who didn't get that. It's not that indicative, right, that it's not right now that they're not getting to that next stage. But I mean, any advice you can share for either of them, and thanks so much again for taking the time to speak with us today.
Of course, no problem. And I guess my final words would just be just don't be afraid to ask questions. I think as a student, sometimes you can feel like you're so far on the outside of it all that you don't feel like you belong to the profession. I mean, technically, people would say that you don't, but you're a part of the profession because you're on your way to becoming licensed. And I just think that you should be comfortable, or maybe comfortably uncomfortable, contacting people asking for information, asking for help, like a lot of people are far more open to speaking to you and sharing their experiences than you realize. And so if you have questions, I would encourage you to reach out to people. I'm always open to having chats with people about what they need as far as a placement is concerned, or if they're trying to figure out where they fit in, what area of the profession they want to work in. I'm open to having chats like that. I would encourage you to join any student associations within your school. I believe most of the schools have law student associations or paralegal student associations. So I would encourage you to join those. Go to court. And it's one of the things I wish I'd done more of when I was a student is go to court. It is so much easier now to observe than it used to be because you can observe on Zoom court and you learn a lot that way. So even if you're unable to go to court as part of your placement, you can take some time, maybe like 1 or 2 times a week, to just kind of sit down and observe what's going on. I don't have the link with me here, but I'm wondering, I don't know if you have it, JP, but if you don't, I can see if I can find it and send it to you to share with your students. But the Ontario Court of Justice has links to the dockets for the day, where to go to join. You can just join as an observer. And one of the things that would be really cool is if you to kind of follow a case from the very beginning to the end. And so when you're watching something, if it's a first appearance, you know when that person's back because they'll announce it in the courtroom. And then you can make a note of it on your calendar and come back and watch and just kind of watch the progression of a case and see where things go. And take notes on that. It's a really, really great way to learn. And because it's so accessible, I really, really encourage not just students, but paralegals as well to do that.
Perfect. So once again, Deborah, thanks so much for taking the time to join us here today. I guess I'll see you hopefully tomorrow, or whenever this is airing. It will already happened. And thanks again for everyone for tuning in. Take care.
Thank